All right, we're continuing to read from chapter 3 of You Are The Placebo. A quick look at how the brain works. Up to this point, I've briefly mentioned terms like brain circuitry, neural networks, brain chemistry, and genetic expression, without giving you much explanation of what they mean. So for the rest of the chapter, I want to outline some simple scientific understandings of how the brain and body work together in order to build a complete model of how you really can become your own placebo. Your brain, which is at least 75% water and is the consistency of a soft-boiled egg, is made up of some 100 billion nerve cells called neurons that are seamlessly arranged and suspended in this aqueous environment. Each nerve cell resembles a leafless but elastic oak tree with wiggly branches and root systems that connect and disconnect to other nerve cells. The number of connections a particular nerve cell might make can range from 1,000 to more than 100,000, depending on where in the brain the nerve cell resides. For example, your neocortex, your thinking brain, has about 10,000 to 40,000 connections per neuron. We used to think of the brain as a computer, and while there are certainly some similarities, we now know there's much more to the story. Each neuron is its own unique biocomputer with more than 60 megabytes of RAM. It's capable of processing enormous amounts of data, up to hundreds of thousands of functions per second. As we learn new things and have new experiences in our lives, our neurons make new connections, exchanging electrochemical information with each other. Those connections are called synaptic connections because the place where the cells exchange information, the gap between the branch of one neuron and the root of another, is called a synapse. If learning is making new synaptic connections, then remembering is keeping those connections wired together. So in effect, a memory is a long-term relationship or connection between the nerve cells. And the creation of these connections and the ways they change over time alters the physical structure of the brain. As the brain makes these changes, our thoughts produce a blend of various chemicals called neurotransmitters. Serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine are a few examples you may recognize. When we think thoughts, neurotransmitters at one branch of one neuron tree cross the synaptic gap to reach the root of another neuron tree. Once they cross that gap, the neuron fires with an electrical bolt of information. When we continue thinking the same thoughts, the neuron keeps firing in the same ways, strengthening the relationship between the two cells so that they can more readily convey a signal the next time those neurons fire. So if you're always sitting there just going, woe is me, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm so poor, I'm such a drug addict, I'm such an alcoholic, I'm such a food addict, I'm such this, and you're just constantly repeating these things in your head and you're taking no action, and that's how you're going to continue to behave. It's that simple, guys. As a result, the brain shows physical evidence that something was not only learned, but also remembered. This process of selective strengthening is called synaptic potentiation. When jungles of neurons fire in unison to support a new thought, an additional chemical, a protein, is created within the nerve cell and makes its ways to the cell's center or nucleus, where it lands in the DNA. So your thoughts, literally, by thinking them over and over again, become part of your DNA, your structure of who you are. The protein then switches on several genes. Since the job of the genes is to make proteins that maintain both the structure and function of the body, the nerve cell then quickly makes a new protein to create new branches between nerve cells. So when we repeat a thought or an experience enough times, our brain cells make not only stronger connections between each other, which affects our physiological functions, but also a greater number of total connections, which affects the physical structure of the body. The brain becomes more enriched microscopically. So as soon as you think a new thought, you become changed, neurologically, chemically, and genetically. In fact, you can gain thousands of new connections in a matter of seconds from novel learning, new ways of thinking, and fresh experiences. This means by thought alone, you can personally activate new genes right away. It happens just by changing your mind. It's mind over matter. Now, I will interject this. People get stuck and they think, oh, well, I can just think my way to everything. No, you can't, because if you're behaving and you're continue to consume and you're continuing to put poisons in your body and you're continuing daily, moment by moment, to consume this shit in your ears and your eyes and your mouth, and you think that you're like, oh, well, I'm just going to think positive. I'm just going to think great. I'm going to think that I'm in perfect health. I'm going to think that everything's okay. It's not going to happen. Listen, we are walking in truth, fact, around. Those people are people who, again, that's just as bad as people saying, my life's shit, my life's nothing, my life's that, blah, 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 blah. This toxic positivity people are just as bad. To sit there and think you're going to think your way out of things and not going to take any action, or not going to, speak the right things and therefore take the right actions, that's insanity as well. That's wishful thinking, hopeful thinking. It's laziness. People want to sit there and, consume and consume. They're overweight, they're obese, and they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to think my way to being slim and slender and healthy. It's not going to happen. You have to take the proper action. Nobel laureate Eric Kandel, MD, showed that when new memories are formed, the number of synaptic connections in the sensory neurons that are stimulated doubles to 2,600. However, unless the original learning experience is repeated over and over again, the number of new connections falls back to the original 1,300 in a matter of only 3 weeks. So, and then there's that other group of people who get all hyped up and want to make a change, and they're doing everything right, and they only do it for a couple weeks, and then they go right back to their old ways, their old habits, because they haven't affected any change. They haven't confronted anything. They haven't faced their demons. They haven't faced their past. They haven't faced any of this stuff. So they think they're just going to think their way and act real quick. And it doesn't happen because they've spent 40 years making this old person. And they, instead of crushing that old person, finding out how that old person even came about and was built, they just think they're going to put on a new mask and be like, okay, this is me now. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't work like that. This is a multi-layered process that takes, it's severely uncomfortable, it's extremely difficult, and it takes everything you have. And you have to focus, put your time, attention, and focus and efforts into making it happen. And it takes time. It's not an overnight thing. It's not 1 month later you're healed type of thing. It's not 6 months later you're a brand new person. This is a life-changing thing. Therefore, if we repeat what we learn enough times, we strengthen communities of neurons to support us in remembering it the next time. If we don't, then the synaptic connections soon disappear and the memory is erased. This is why it's important for us to continually update, review, and remember our new thoughts, choices, behaviors, habits, beliefs, and experiences if we want them to solidify in our brains. And this is what I'm telling you. That's why we have to, moment by moment, every day we are working on, because we've been a mindless minion our whole lives. We've been on autopilot, a brain dead zombie on autopilot our whole lives, just fitting in, going along with the crowd, just going with the flow, just, living up to social standards, just doing what was expected of us. So we've never had these thoughts. So we've never focused on what we're thinking all day long. And this is how you affect that change. You have to be consciously aware of every thought that runs through your head and every emotion that you're having and every action that you're taking. And you have to question it. Where is this coming from? Why am I thinking, acting, talking like this? Is it beneficial to me? Is it not beneficial to my healing? Is it detrimental to my health and well-being? Every single thought. And you are able to do that. You have the time. You are capable, completely capable and able of doing these things, but you cannot do them if your attention is out here and you're worshiping all this entertainment, all these politics, and all these other things outside of you. You have to, the only way it can be done is taking your attention back and focusing on yourself. To get an idea of how vast this system really is, imagine a nerve cell connecting to 40,000 other nerve cells. Let's say it's processing 100,000 bits of information per second and sharing that information with other neurons that are also processing 100,000 functions per second. This network, formed from clusters of neurons working together, is called a neural network, or a neural net for short. Neural nets form communities of synaptic connections. We can also call them your neurocircuitry. So as there are physical changes in the nerve cells that make up your brain's gray matter, and as neurons are selected and instructed to organize themselves into these vast networks capable of processing hundreds of millions of bits of information, the physical hardware of the brain also changes, adapting to the information it receives from the environment. In time, as the networks, converging and diverging propagations of electrical activity, like a crazy lightning storm in thick clouds, are repeatedly turned on, the brain will keep using the same hardware systems, the physical neural networks, but will also create a software program, an automatic neural network. That's how the programs are installed in the brain. The hardware creates the software, and the software system is embedded into the hardware. And every time the software is used, it reinforces the hardware. So you are consciously, subconsciously, and consciously creating your life moment by moment every day. And this is why I tell you, everything we do matters. Everything. You cannot do anything in jest. Everything we do matters. Every thought we think, every word we say, every action we take, everything we do matters. And it's either for our health and well-being or it's detrimental to our health and well-being. So when you're thinking the same thoughts and having the same feelings all the time because you're not learning or doing anything new, your brain is firing its neurons and activating the neural networks in exactly the same sequences, patterns, and combinations. They become the automatic programs that you unconsciously use every day. You have an automatic neural network to speak a language, to shave your face or put on makeup, to type on the computer, to judge your coworker, and so on. Because you've performed those actions so many times that they've become practically unconscious, you no longer have to consciously think about it. It's effortless. Like you're bitching, griping, and complaining. You've done it so much that it's just effortless. It just automatically comes out of your mouth constantly. You've reinforced those circuits so often that they've become hardwired into you. The connections between neurons become more glued together. Additional circuits are formed, and the branches actually expand and become physically thicker, just as we might strengthen and reinforce a bridge, build a few new roads, or widen a freeway to accommodate more traffic. One of the most basic principles in neuroscience states, nerve cells that fire together wire together. As your brain fires repeatedly in the same manner, you're reproducing the same level of mind. According to neuroscience, mind is the brain in action or at work. So, mind is the brain in action or at work. If you are not using your brain, if you are not using the faculties of your mind, the faculty of reasoning, intelligence, and your will, right? Then you're a mindless. You're a slave-minded zombie. You are on autopilot. You are being controlled. You are not in control of your life. Thus, we can say that if you're reminding yourself of who you think you are on a daily basis, right, by reproducing the same mind, you're making your brain fire in the same ways, and you'll activate the same neural networks for years on end. By the time you reach your mid-30s, your brain has organized itself into a very finite signature of automatic programs. You're just a zombie. You're a minion. You're completely on programs. And that fixed pattern is called your identity. Think of it as a box inside your brain. There's no literal box inside your head, of course, but it's safe to say that thinking inside the box means you physically hardwired your brain into a limited pattern. By reproducing the same level of mind over and over again, The most commonly fired, neurologically wired set of circuits has predetermined who you are as a result of your own volition. So you've literally made up your mind. You made up your mind who you are. You're a victim. You are in pain. You are helpless. You are hopeless. Things will never get better for you. You are being controlled. You are enslaved. You have no free will to choose what goes in your body. You are being poisoned, and you don't have any choice what you eat, what you listen to, what you look at. You are powerless. That's what you're saying. Otherwise, you start taking control. You take your attention back. You quit worshiping things outside of you, and you pay attention moment by moment, every moment, to every thought that crosses your mind, every word that comes out of your mouth, every action that you take, and you weigh it. Is it beneficial to me? Is it beneficial to my health and well-being? And you work on that and you strengthen it. Is it detrimental to me? Is it detrimental to my health and well-being? Is it not supporting who I'm trying to become? Is it not supporting the soul? Is it building up my ego? Then you need to get rid of those. You need to completely process, where's this coming from? Oh, it's stemming from my childhood trauma. Oh, it's stemming from my childhood abuse. Then you need to face that. You need to quit putting that in the back of your mind and thinking that you can just get on with your life without ever having faced these things and processed them and worked through them. Because then things are never going to change. That's called insanity, to think that things are going to change when you have not processed things. So remember, guys, that's it for now. Remember, take care of yourself because nobody else will.